John, this fact about the amazing story of Oscar-winning film The Pianist is going to blow you away. You ready?
Oh yeah.
Welcome to
What's Up Poland?
the daily video show
Where
we talk about
news,
views,
culture,
history,
life.
everything Poland. So everybody, I think, knows the film The Pianist. It was a big hit. Won 3 Oscars in 2003. Blimey, has the time flown by, John. But one thing I didn't realize until I read this amazing article, which you can actually read by clicking on the link below this video, is that up until relatively recently, the wife of the hero, the pianist Władysław Szpilman, the subject of this film, Halina Szpilman, was actually still alive. Sadly, she passed away recently. And also his son is also still alive, which is quite unusual because a long time has passed since the events that were in the book, which eventually got released as The Pianist and then became this Oscar-winning film with I think a really impressive performance by Adrian Brody.
Yeah, fantastic, right?
Well, I think everything about that film, actually, for me, it's one of the best. It's not often talked about by Polish people as a Second World War film, I don't think. We talk about the classics. We talk about the Warsaw Uprising, things like that. But of course, a lot of the film is about the Warsaw Uprising as well, because he survived the Warsaw Uprising along with everything else. It's the amazing story, not actually a unique story, but unique because it's his, of this brilliant pianist, Jewish Polish pianist, Władysław Szpilman. It's a real story, and he tells the story of how the Second World War literally interrupts his piano playing as the bombs start dropping and dust starts falling from the ceiling as the first bombs fall on Warsaw on the 1st of September 1939, taking the world by surprise and taking Władysław Szpilman by surprise. And John, that moment at the start when he's playing his Chopin etude, I suppose, or something, and it
Nocturne,
stops.
probably.
Nocturne or an etude. I'm a bit of a cultural philistine, but I know good Chopin playing, and obviously Spielmann was a lover of Chopin. Chopin dominates the whole of the film, as of course he does the Polish Spirit. And then it tells the story about how Warsaw's Jews and Jewish Poles from around Warsaw start to be forced into an ever constricting noose, the really tragic story of the Warsaw Ghetto, which was just
atrocious,
sheer hell, particularly for the people who are outside of Warsaw, who turned up and were just basically dumped on the streets with no support whatsoever. And it shows some of the human story of the ghetto. It shows, for example, that there were people who were living quite well in the ghetto and also people who were living very, very badly. And obviously the proportions were a very small amount of people somehow managed to get along. And then in between, there were people who were living in Warsaw who were trapped there, like, of course, the Spielman family. Now, he was a well-known musician, not without influence, and ended up finding himself playing in a cafe, relatively actually assured position in the Warsaw Ghetto, at least for a while. And then, of course, as you know, they started to evacuate or force the Polish Jews that were within the camp to leave by taking
Operation Reinhardt, right?
Exactly, the Umschlagplatz, which there's a monument today in Warsaw. It's still there, and anyone who's watched the film knows that there's this remarkable moment where his family are rounded up and pretty unsure about what's happening, and they've just been through hell to get to that point, and then Spielman is pulled out from the crowd. In the film, it's by an SP policeman, so a Jewish policeman with a truncheon type thing. And actually, in the story, which I didn't realize, it's been a long time since I read the book. He's apparently, according to his son Andre, he didn't actually know why he'd been pulled out, but the person who pulled him out saved his life, because unfortunately the rest of his family was sent to Treblinka, where they were murdered. So, John, this story reminded me about how amazing the story of Władysław Szpilman's survival is, from the ghetto to the uprising to the remarkable fact that his life was saved as Warsaw was an empty ruin at the end of the Warsaw Uprising by a German soldier who actually kept him alive, a remarkable chap called Wilhelm Hossenfeld.
He was an SS officer, right?
I can't remember. I know I think he was a major. He was definitely an officer, and he had some ability to make things happen, because he actually got a whole bunch of stuff for Spielman, but he was risking his life with every single turn. It was remarkable. And there's that iconic moment in the film when when they discover each other, and Szpilman basically having gone through everything he goes through, having been supported but also betrayed and in fear of his life, and survived gunfights and everything, explosions, and life on his own, and the sheer hell of having to stay hidden away for months at a time without contact with anyone. And of course, his classical music kept him alive. He tells his wife Helena, she's talking about it here, so sad she passed away, that he would play concertos in his mind, and that kept him sane. Remarkable story. And then he and Hosenfeld chance upon each other, and he happens to have chanced upon the only good German soldier, as Szpilman calls it, who actually keeps him alive and brings him a fur rug and all this kind of thing, and brings him food and things like that. So it's a remarkable story, and I highly recommend that if you want to know more about Władysław Szpilman, find out some more details, and actually hear from his family, because up until relatively recently, his wife was still alive and was able to give testament to this remarkable man's story, who was modest enough that, according to his family, he probably, if he'd been alive, wouldn't have wanted to watch that film. What a character.
Indeed, indeed. And of course, it's worth reminding listeners that we're filming this episode actually the same week where Poland commemorates the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which actually broke out on the 19th of April, 1943.
That's right, yes. And the blue and white and the white and red flags were flying over the Warsaw Ghetto, bringing hope and inspiration to the Poles around the ghetto, who one day, of course, would launch their own uprising with equally calamitous effect. By the end of the Second World War, Warsaw was a smoking ruin. And somewhere in that smoking ruin, the so-called Robinson Crusoes, as they were called at the time, so these little individual people in cellars and bunkers and attics hiding away, just like Władysław Szpilman. Just amazing. And there's so many of those stories. Szpilman is easily the most famous to come out. So if you're more interested in things like this, of course, you can go to thefirstnews.com. All you have to do is click on the story below this link, and you'll find out more. You'll hear from Halina and Andrzej.